made to relativity by Sommerfeld. That's it. So I'm picking up from last year's talk where I pointed out there was translation problems in Einstein's 1905 paper, and special relativity was translated into English. And this what I'm showing now is comparing two translations of what's said in the German. So it was Arthur Miller translates it as that down there. Above it is the common translation. And so it's highlighting the difference. It's particle in that translation, and in the next translation it's point particle. So the commonly used translation misses out the word point. And it's, if you go to the German, you can still see it's there, the German word point shaped with the particle. So the word point is usually missed out in translations. And so the significance of that is the point particle theory was investigated a great deal by this person, Boscovich. And so when Einstein was talking about relativity, he was talking about point particles, and so hence he was really talking from the context of the point particle theory from Boscovich. And there's also another person, Kant, who talked a lot about point particles, and so it's sometimes called the Kant-Boscovich theory.
Kant manual?
Manuel Kant, yeah.
No, I didn't know, that's interesting.
I don't know if I pronounced that word properly. Some people will pronounce it C-U-N-T. So I'll try to avoid saying. So this is a reminder of Boscovich theory, and it's my friend Dragisov who gives a lot of talks on Boscovich, and he claims that from Boscovich theory you get the idea of quantum physics. So continuing my investigation, I have Sommerfeld as the main person that was making major changes to Einstein's relativity. In the original relativity, there was no such thing as light speed c being the limit to what speeds a material object can travel. Sommerfeld seems to have been the one that added that idea to the theories of relativity. This then ties into the EPL paradox, quantum entanglement, etc., but which I'm not going to have time for. So, as a reminder, this from the book of Arthur Miller, Special Relativity. I think he was more of a historian, and so he was giving a historian perspective of physics and not considering the change in physics that mistranslation would have had. Physics would be a problem for physicists, not in the department that was his department, which was history. The usual translation into English is this one, and it's Miller points out the footnotes in that are not in the original 1905 German. I contend that the bad translation to English and the footnotes that are added make the theory different in English to what it was originally in German in 1905. So the translation, which I deem a bad mistranslation, was from Sommerfeld's perspective, what he believed about relativity, i.e. he had the translation adjusted to align with his beliefs for what the footnotes were saying. So this is who Sommerfeld was. He was a German theoretical physicist who pioneered developments in atomic and quantum physics. And he was nominated a lot of times for Nobel Prizes but didn't receive any. So he kept missing out all the time. So, as you know, Nobel Prize winners, suddenly this one didn't make it, some nomination. So what I have is it's a letter from Einstein to Sommerfeld. And this was, let's see the year. What was the year? Well, I'm making a note of where he now translations, given my discovery that a translation can be made totally different to what's originally said in the untranslated. Anyway, proceeding with this translation, I think it was 1905, it's 1908. The letter was 1908. So this is what Einstein says. Highly honoured Professor, many thanks for sending me your latest papers. Of great interest to me, of course, is the one on the speed of signal propagation. Last summer I had a lively exchange of letters on this subject with Professor Wien, it's pronounced that W-I-E-N. I didn't succeed in convincing him of my view. From my church result that the Maxwell-Lorentz equation can be replaced by action at distance, propagating the speed of light c. I concluded that a signal whose propagation is due solely to electromagnetic interaction between point particles, that is using the word point particles again, cannot possibly propagate faster than c. So this is Einstein in 1908. He seems to be going along with changes made to what was being said in 1905. So he's saying something a bit different to what he was saying in 1905. And he's referring to what Sommerfeld sent to him about the speed of signal propagation. In the original German, Einstein was not making the claim electromagnetic interaction between point particles cannot possibly propagate faster than c. Anyway, except that translation, and it seems the idea of maximum signal propagation speed was still in dispute in 1908, up until 1908. And that was after 1905 when Einstein published his first paper on special relativity. In the original German paper, there's no mention of a maximum signal propagation speed. The idea of a maximum signal propagation speed, it seems, was Sommerfeld's theory. So when Einstein's special relativity 1905 paper was translated into English, that was via the influence of Sommerfeld. Sommerfeld was the one that added the footnotes to the paper in the English, and he was placing a bias onto the translation to make it conform to his theory. What is basically happening is that we start with Einstein theory, then it becomes modified to become the Einstein-Sommerfeld theory. So we need to look at Sommerfeld's theory that got merged into Einstein's theory. Anyway, and talk of a wave, it is a disturbance in the attraction of particles. And that's the perspective I talk about. And this Sommerfeld's theory was published in 1914 in the Annals of Physics. and that was translated into English in the following book. However, the book review turned up in Nature on that said, quoting it down here, translation into English from the German and the French divisions, because there was French papers there as well. The figures is inept, so the translation is inept, i.e. bad, and it also notes the figures were bad to read. So basically, it's another bad translation of a German paper into English. So most physicists that are English speaking are going from bad translations of German papers, it seems. So I seem to be surrounded by bad translations of physics papers into English. Physicists don't seem to bother with tidying up their translations and just want to make a mess of them. So this is what I think is happening. Germany was the most dominant country in doing physics before World War II, so most of the important physics papers were written in German. After World War II, America became dominant in physics because they had the atom bomb, etc. So the language of physics then became English. The German papers were then translated into English, but done so badly, where such things as the translations were being influenced to be biased by others, such as Sommerfeld, to have the papers translated in a way to conform to their theories. So subtleties in the German language and so forth didn't get translated into English, and notes were not being taken that the translators were altering the theory to conform to their beliefs. So it's all just a mess. Most of the German papers, I think, were badly translated into English. And so it's not just a case of Einstein's paper on relativity being badly translated to English, but rather a case of all or most papers were badly translated into English. And that's what I suspect. Thus the English-speaking community is going by badly misrepresented version of theories that were different from the original German. And so it's such a big mess, it's beyond my abilities to deal with. Anyway, picking up on what I've found so far, going by the Brillouin translation of Sommerfeld's paper, which was about the propagation of light in dispersing media, and it's reported at the Dresden Scientific Conference. It's an authorised translation. It seems to be correct when I compare to Google Translate. The last part translates into being an objection to the relative, which would probably mean relativity theory of electrodynamics and elimination. When I say it seems to be correct, I'm just referring to that little bit. I'm still trying to make sense of the translation. I'm still looking at the complete translation. So in this one, in this translation, I'm just going to assume it's right. An objection against the theory of relativity and its removal. And that's by Sommerfeld as well. It says, in electrodynamics, which was founded by Einstein on the principle of relativity, superluminal velocities are impossible under any circumstances, both as convention velocity of a change or as propagation velocity of an electrodynamic disturbance. And so the reference cited in that paper as to where it gets that from it says Einstein. So it seems to be circular, it seems to be that Sommerfeld suggested the idea to Einstein, Einstein put in his papers, then Sommerfeld cites Einstein. So I can get an English translation of that paper which he's referring to. Like this. So that's the paper where Einstein's talking about it. I'm jumping down too far. In the 1907 paper, Einstein was thinking in terms of the impossibility of speeds faster than light speed in vacuum C. But he wasn't saying that in 1905 in his first relativity paper when it was published in German. He seems to be implying it in his 1905 paper when it was mistranslated into English more than a decade later under the influence of someone, which is Sommerfeld, who wanted that interpretation of relativity so that it explained his theory. We see how things change from one level to another. The translators can be biased to say something different to what's actually said. And note from Einstein's 1905 paper to Sommerfeld, it might have been what Sommerfeld was saying to him that influenced Einstein to come to the belief of the impossibility of speeds faster than light speed C. It wasn't in the original German 1905 paper. So I'll remind you of this. Some people think that Einstein's first wife was helping Einstein with those papers, the 1905 papers. So a theory might have been, in 1905, Einstein theory. And that might be what we could consider a different theory to what came later under Sommerfeld. So reminder of what Einstein was saying in 1907, considering faster light speed in vacuum C, he says the result signifies that we would have to consider as possible a transfer mechanism whose use would produce an effect which precedes the cause accompanied by an act of will. For example, i.e. backwards time travel, information sent to the future and the past, etc. Which is surprising that he does not want to consider that impossible. He's saying it's maybe possible, even though, in my opinion, this result does not contain a contradiction from a purely logical point of view. That's Einstein saying that. So now he only has an opinion and nothing else to back up his claim. He continues. It conflicts, this is Einstein, it conflicts so absolutely with the character of or experience that the impossibility of the assumption W greater than V is sufficiently proven by this result. And V in this case is being used as light speed C in vacuum, and W as a speed greater than C. So it's not really proof, in my view. What he is stating is opinion, which results in must be another assumption. If you want to add that, it's another assumption. So 1905, he's got two assumptions or postulates, and suddenly now he's having to add an extra one to special relativity. It's not in the original 1905 German theory, which is called the Einstein theory. There's no backwards time travel for speeds greater than c in the Einstein theory. So picking up now, we have these equations of the Lorentz-Einstein transformations and the Galilean transformations. In quantum physics, we have this thing called correspondence principle. So really, we need to it explains how quantum physics connects to classical physics. We need the same thing with Einstein's relativity. How is it supposed to connect to classical physics before it? So how does special relativity connect to Newtonian physics? So Lorentz transformations is usually deemed special relativity, and the Galilean transformation usually deemed Newtonian physics. So putting aside the issues where that could be arguable, because correspondence of how they're connected is usually that the, well, as a note, it's not mentioned in the 1905 special relativity paper that there are such things as Galilean transformations. So no correspondence principle was given. That was given later. Galilean transformations came out in 1905. And in this book here, back to the Arthur Miller, he's saying it's 1911 for the Galilean transformations, and somebody else is saying it's 1908. But the point to note is it's not 1905 for Galilean transformations. So the correspondence principle for relativity came after 1905, and it was wrong, of course. And so I need to give an example. And it's in this book, Relativity, Thermodynamics and Cosmology. It says, when the relative velocity between system 3 is all compared with that of light, they reduce to the so-called Galilean transformation equations. And many relativity texts say the same thing, and that's all false. As this paper points out, by Rolf, two myths about special relativity, and he points out the Lorentz transformations do not reduce to the Galilean transformations when the ratio V divided by C is 4, which is contrary to what is taught. So physics students are taught to believe false maths. They're told something which is mathematically false. So the maths actually looks deceptively simple to begin with, but it has a fatal flaw which is resulting in it being misdealt with. What is taught as mass relativity is mathematically false. Lorentz transformations do not reduce to Galilean transformations as V tends to 0, contrary to what is taught. So, looking at equations, Lorentz transformation for length, x prime is equal to gamma all times x minus vt. As v tends to 0, gamma tends to 1. And then so the equation then tends to be x prime equal to x minus vt, which is the Galilean transformation for length. And that's okay, that works. However, when you go to time, the Lorentz transformation for time is t prime is equal to gamma, and that's all times t minus vx divided by c squared. As v tends to 0, then gamma tends to 1 as before, and the Lorentz transformation for time then tends to t prime is equal to t minus vx divided by c squared. And it doesn't tend to the Galilean transformation of t prime equals to t. And so the mistake has been made, usually, of assuming the term vx divided by c squared as tending to 0, when it of course does not, because v tends to 0 can increase x divided by c squared to counteract that. It equals, when v equals 0, you have t prime is equal to t. That's a trivial case. You could say the trivial thing back in here in the length, when v equals 0, x prime is equal to x, and that's sort of like a trivial case. What we're talking about is when v tends to 0, before it gets to actually being 0. So this is what Einstein was talking about, the relativistic addition of speed based on Lorentz transformations. And in that equation, you don't get u as being greater than c. It's either c or a value less than c. And that gives you c as the limiting speed. But because Lorentz transformations do not reduce to Galilean transformations at low speed, this restriction of limiting limiting speed does not apply to Galilean transformations. In Galilean transformations, any speed is allowed without that restriction from that equation above. Thus, as using Galilean transformations in analysis of moving bodies, those objects can go faster than light speed c. So only an artificial setup where you're making the restriction of light speed c. So unfortunately not having fully enough time to deal with that, and in Sommerfeld's theory you have different velocities, stroke speeds, that can be associated with light. You've got the group speed and the phase speed, etc. And in the Brillian translation it says it's an essential result of Dr. Brillian's work that the signal velocity is practically the same as the group velocity whenever the incoming wavelength is different from the characteristic wavelength of the dispersive medium, i.e. when the wave motion proceeds without strong absorption. We will show that the wavefront velocity is always identical with the velocity of light in vacuum c, irrespective of whether the material is normally or anomalously dispersive, whether it is transparent or oblique, or whether it is simply or doubly refractive. So Einstein in 1905 special relativity paper is not referring to these different types of speed for light. He's not talking about group speed or phase speed and so forth. And it seems from what Brillian is saying that the light speed c is the one being referred to by Brillian above. But the general gist can pick up from this, different velocity speeds can be associated with an electromagnetic signal wave, where under correct interpretation of Newtonian context can have faster than light speed c. Under the distortion of the mistakes made with relativity, that's led people to doubt that when there is experimental evidence for faster than light. And sort of one example is this one. It's published in 2008, and somebody's claiming that Mintz is claiming that you can send signals faster than the speed of light c. But sort of like those claims are met with disbelief because people have this belief that light speed c is limiting speed and therefore you can send signals faster than light. And also need to point out that in quantum physics you have the idea that when they try to combine relativity to it, that only random information can be sent faster than light speed c. But in the equations from Einstein's relativity, you go back to the original, there's nothing about that sort of thing. So what they're doing is adding more mistakes upon top of each other, and when they've got clear evidence of faster than light speed c, they're sort of like doubting it, not believing it, because they've got this strong prejudice based on these mistakes. Thank you.
Question?
Well, how do we set it right? I mean, I feel I should give back my physics degree now.